All right, it's Chapter 7, Part 3. I might even start a little bit into Chapter 8. All right, so continuing Chapter 7. In April 1862, Lincoln approved another law, one that at last outlawed slavery in Washington, D.C. Lincoln had been hoping to ban slavery in the capital ever since he first served there in Congress in the late 1840s. The bill was not perfect. It offered generous compensation for slave owners and imposed a kind of apprentice labor system on younger African Americans. But it did mark the first time in the history of the United States that the government had ever officially moved against slavery. African Americans and white abolitionists celebrated the milestone enthusiastically. To keep the anti-slavery momentum going, the president next invited congressmen from the loyal slave states to visit him at the White House. He proposed to them that the United States government buy slaves from their owners and gradually set them free. It was cheaper, he reminded them, for the country to pay for slaves than to pay for a long and costly war. The slaveholders themselves would lose no money, and the pressure on the South to end the rebellion would increase. But the border state congressmen ultimately turned down the humane and generous offer. Disappointed, Lincoln finally concluded that he must use his powers as president to do what the generals could not, and the courts and Congress would not. Throughout that spring, however, Union armies suffered so many additional setbacks that Lincoln felt he could not yet act. Moreover, his slow-moving commanding general, George B. McClellan, told Lincoln that he would never support a war to free slaves and warned that his soldiers would not either. If Lincoln acted, he hinted, the army would rapidly disintegrate. Frustrated by a general who would neither fight nor consider emancipation as another weapon to win the war, Lincoln dismissed McClellan. On July 22, 1862, he summoned his cabinet for a crucial meeting at the White House. Most of these men had opposed slavery as long and as sincerely as he had. When they were seated around the table in Lincoln's office, the president excitedly told them his dramatic news. He was now prepared to free slaves in the Confederate States. He read aloud to them a brief document he had prepared for publication. It was not yet finished in his usual brilliant style. Still, it is possible that July 22nd might have become the nation's Emancipation Day. Instead, to the president's surprise, most members of the cabinet expressed the belief that emancipation was a bad idea. The war had been going badly, one of them pointed out, that Americans might regard such an announcement as an act of desperation, a last shriek on the retreat. Lincoln was disheartened, but he heeded their advice. He issued no proclamation that day. As his advisors suggested, he would wait until the North finally won a major battle. On the previous page here is a picture. Okay, and I'll read the caption. Lincoln reads his earliest draft of an Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet. Those are like his advisors, his team of people that surround the president. He read it to them on July 22, 1862. Artist Francis B. Carpenter created this scene as an oil painting 2 years later, from which A.H. Ritchie fashioned this hugely popular print. Ironically, at the meeting it portrays, Lincoln's cabinet convinced the president not to issue his proclamation just yet. Chapter 8. Fair Warning on Slavery. The desperately needed Union victory did not come quickly. In fact, later that summer, Lincoln's forces lost the next major battle they fought against the Confederates. The latest catastrophe occurred at the Second Battle of Bull Run. Oh, what a terrible slaughter, the heartsick president told a visitor. Those dreadful days, shall I ever forget them? No, never, never. Lincoln had no choice but to return George McClellan to command. Convinced that military success must surely come eventually, the president continued to work away at a more polished version of his emancipation order. He decided it would take the form of a warning, giving rebels until a specifically chosen date to throw down their arms, affirm their allegiance to the government, or risk losing their valuable slave property. But the president continued to fret that no matter how he couched emancipation, no matter how carefully he worded it, and no matter how much notice he gave Southerners before it took effect, he would suffer a large political setback whenever it was issued. No one of the day understood public relations better than Abraham Lincoln. In the days before broadcast news and political polling, he seemed to sense exactly how far he could go on any given issue. Given the choice between acting aggressively and moving slowly, Lincoln almost always chose to be cautious. Where slavery was concerned, he feared that making emancipation sound like a first step towards black equality would instantly lose him the support not only of the border states, but of the vast majority of white people in the North, and not just Democrats. Racism was widespread in 1860s America, North as well as South. And with the fall of 1862 congressional elections fast approaching, dissatisfaction with Lincoln on the issue of race would almost certainly lead to major political setbacks for Republicans. To limit such consequences, Lincoln not only kept his emancipation plans secret for a time, he made a number of statements designed to convince people he would strike a blow against slavery only if it would help save the Union and not because it might help people of color. Worst, at least to modernize, he made it clear to white and black people alike that he still believed free African Americans should leave the country and begin new lives in Africa or the Caribbean. What they call that in earlier chapters, colonization. Anyway, looked at from the 21st century, these statements make Lincoln look almost racist himself. But in 1862, they echoed mainstream white American thought, and Lincoln sincerely believed he must utter them or risk another revolution, this time with the North, which would have doomed emancipation anyway. But in his efforts to prepare the country for freedom, the president may have gone too far. On August 14th, he summoned a delegation of free African Americans to the White House to discuss colonization. There's that word again. On one hand, the event marked an important first for equality. No group of black people had ever been welcomed to the executive mansion for any reason. But once they were assembled, Lincoln read a statement that seemed to suggest that they, not Southerners, had caused the war. Perhaps you have long been free, Lincoln told them, or all of your lives. Your race are suffering, in my judgment, the greatest wrong inflicted on any people. But even when you cease to be slaves, you are yet far removed from being placed on an equality with the white race. You are cut off from the advantages which the other race enjoy. The aspiration of men is to enjoy equality with the best when free, but on this broad continent, not a single man of your race is made the equal of a single man of ours. Go where you are treated the best, and the ban is still upon you. Wow. On this occasion, Lincoln seemed to come close to placing blame on African Americans for causing the Civil War. We took to our condition, he insisted, owing to the condition of the two races on this continent. I need not recount to you the effects upon white men growing out of the institution of slavery. I believe in its general evil effects on the white race. See our present condition, the country engaged in war, our white men cutting one another's throats, knowing nothing how far it will extend. I repeat, without the institution of slavery and the colored race as a basis, the war would not have an existence. It is better for us both, therefore, to be separated. All right, I'm going to stop there for today. That's the start of chapter 8 that we just finished.